Hey, how's it going? So, in the year 2040, the Tantalus base gets built up on Mars. A crew of 8 astronauts is out on a 6-month mission to collect some samples, and today is actually their last day. In about 19 hours, the Aurora spacecraft is going to be coming from Earth to come get them. Out in the Martian desert, Vincent and Rebecca are driving a rover over towards a dig site, noticing that a big sandstorm is rolling in. When they get over there, Vincent calls up Kim on the radio to say it's time to head on back to the base, reminding her that they really need to get prepared for departure. Kim, however, just ignores him and keeps on digging, desperate as heck to find some good samples. While they wait, Vincent tells Rebecca he's just so tired of Kim's whole attitude and isn't looking forward to the 6-month journey back home to Earth, even though he really can't wait to be home. When Kim finally does get in the rover, she complains that they're heading back with absolutely nothing to show for it, cause 6 months just wasn't enough time to get anything done. On the way back, they get a call from Captain Charles, who's urging them to hurry it up since they need a hand with fixing the communication link with the Aurora. Back at the base, Richard manages to restore the signal, but he also needs to fix the power, which is having some issues because of the storm. Meanwhile, Marco asks Charles for one last trip out to the dig site, saying he needs to fix a broken gamma sensor. Charles is hesitant, but he eventually agrees, telling him to take Richard along with him and to be back before it gets dark. When the trio arrives and sees Marco and Richard heading out, Kim complains that it's not fair that she was forced to come back while the guys get to go out again. On the way to the site, Richard is pretty shocked to find out that Marco was lying. They aren't going to fix anything, they're actually going to grab a sample of something that's called a microscopic anomaly. Back at the base, Vincent is repairing the cooling system while he's chatting with the psychologist, Robert. He's noticed the Aurora's approach trajectory and thinks it looks kinda like a drunk driving path. Meanwhile, Kim is checking out Marco's workstation to figure out his real intentions, and she finds an image of some cavities in a rock. Rebecca points out that the cavities look a lot like microbial drill holes, and when they look at the sample under the microscope, they find clear signs of bacterial cell division. This all means Marco lied because he refuses to share any of the credit. A ticked-off Charles then calls Richard and Marco to announce that the dig site is now totally off limits. But Marco just tells Richard to pretend he didn't hear Charles on account of the bad signal, eh? So Marco grabs a soil sample from the spot, and as he's looking closer, the ground underneath him starts to shake and then suddenly collapses, causing him to get trapped underground. Richard runs out of the rover to go help, but he can't see very well because of all the steam. A few moments after Richard calls for backup, Charles and Lauren show up to rescue Marco. Richard figures he's already dead, but Lauren disagrees and tries to go down into the crater. Charles immediately stops her, saying the crater is way too dangerous in its current state. They decide that Lauren will stay behind to keep an eye on things, while Charles and Richard head back to base to get the proper rescue gear. At the base, Kim tells Charles she wants to announce their discovery. Richard tells her that Marco is dead, but Kim just thinks it's his own fault for not following protocol, which really gets Richard angry. The group gets in touch with Mission Control, who has seen the report and gives them permission to rescue Marco, no matter what the risk is. Before leaving, Robert wants Charles to give Kim a talking to for her behavior, because Marco's death isn't her fault. But Charles says that every single mistake the team makes is his own responsibility. While Charles is taking Rebecca, Robert and Vincent back to the site, Lauren is waiting in the rover. All of a sudden, she hears someone trying to get into the vehicle and she tries to tell Charles over the radio, but he can't hear her because of all the interference from the storm. When the team finally gets to the dig site, Lauren is gone. They just assume she must have fallen into the crater, so Vincent hooks his suit up to a rope and goes down. As he's about to reach the bottom, he spots some kind of microbial organism growing on the rock formation. The further down he goes, the worse Vincent starts to feel, and he begins gasping for air, having these flashbacks of the time he got accidentally trapped on the Aurora. Noticing this, the others immediately pull on the rope to bring him back up. Vincent calms down and says he didn't see anyone down there. Then, Robert looks around and is surprised to find 2 sets of footprints heading toward the base. This makes no sense, as they could have just taken the rover. The team calls Kim, tells her to get ready for potential casualties, and she points out that if Marco's suit is damaged, he could be suffering from brain damage. Right then, Richard checks the tracking system and sees 2 figures about 50 meters from the base. While Kim is trying to make contact with them on the radio, Richard heads over to the airlock to let them inside. At the same exact time, Kim sees a strange figure slowly approaching. Richard opens the airlock and Marco just collapses onto the floor, showing a hole in his helmet. Richard helps him take the helmet off, but then he pulls back in total shock when he sees that Marco now looks just like a zombie. Suddenly, Marco gets up and grabs a power drill to attack Richard, drilling right into his abdomen. Richard falls down, but he manages to move just enough to hit the alarm. Kim runs to the airlock, but as soon as she sees Marco, she bolts to go hide in another room. Soon after, Lauren also gets to the airlock, revealing that she's been infected too. Richard, fighting through the pain, manages to run into another room, locking the door right behind him. Lauren goes after Kim, who starts to fight off the creature as best she can. Then, Marco joins in, and Kim uses every single object in the room to defend herself. One of the creatures gets distracted, drinking some liquid on the floor, so Kim knocks the other one down and makes a run for it, locking that door too. Right before she passes out, Richard manages to get out a mayday on the radio. When the others get back, Charles tells them to wait outside while he goes in to investigate, finding a complete mess. He finds Kim just as Marco starts smashing the glass door, so Charles tells her to get a suit on while he tries to hold back the creatures. Pretty soon, Marco gets out and Charles tries to reason with him, but it seems like the infected brain doesn't understand any words. As soon as Kim is ready, she gets out of the base and Charles makes a run for the airlock. On his way, the infected astronauts catch up to him and stab him in the shoulder. After a bit of a struggle, Charles gets outside and regroups with the others. They deactivate the door to trap their sick friends inside. Vincent complains, but Kim shows him the creatures' faces and points out that they aren't human anymore. The group then rushes to hide in the greenhouse dome, and Rebecca does her best to treat Charles's wound, even though she isn't a doctor. Charles realizes he's dying and is sad because he can't remember what his own family looks like. So he asks the team to please tell his family they were in his thoughts. All of a sudden, Charles grabs Robert by the neck and the others have to pull him off and try to calm him down. Absolutely desperate, Vincent holds him until Charles is struggling to breathe. Then, Charles tells the team that they'll never see Earth again and he passes out. Vincent thinks he's dead, for sure, but Kim immediately ties him to the table, just in case his body reanimates like Marco and Lawrence did. Upset by the whole scene, Vincent covers the body with a blanket. While they're arguing about what to do, he looks under the blanket and sees the infection spreading. A few moments later, they hear a big explosion from outside and figure out the infected astronauts got out by using an explosive on the airlock. Soon, they get to the dome and start banging on the door. At the exact same time, Charles's body starts to shake for a few seconds. The team really wants to contact the space station, but the communication systems are down. So Vincent volunteers to go through the oxygen tube and head back to the base to fix the system. After he leaves, Rebecca takes a blood sample from Charles and realizes that he's also infected. A few minutes later, Vincent stops crawling because he's having a massive panic attack, haunted by the memories of his accident. Over the radio, Rebecca helps to calm him down, telling him that everyone on the crew is just as scared as he is. When he finally makes it to the base, he finds blood absolutely everywhere, but he starts to get to work. Back in the dome, Rebecca wonders if maybe antibiotics could neutralize the bacteria, and she injects Charles with a solution. His body immediately starts to shake and convulse. Rebecca thinks he might actually be fighting off the infection. However, Kim points out that the movement is really just a natural reflex of the body. Once the body stops moving around, Rebecca takes another blood sample and finds out that the bacteria isn't multiplying anymore, which means the solution doesn't cure it, but it does slow it down. Kim puts the solution into a decontamination sprayer so they can use it against the creatures. Meanwhile, Vincent manages to contact the Aurora, but right before he can tell them about the whole situation, the power gets cut. Robert checks the monitor and realizes their sick friends are heading back to the base because they can't manage to break down the dome's doors. The team agrees to unlock the door to lure the creatures into the airlock and then spray them with the antibiotics. As soon as one of the infected astronauts steps inside, the decontamination spray goes off and the creature drops to the floor, twitching and convulsing. Unfortunately, Rebecca then finds out the effect is only temporary because the bacteria is starting to develop a resistance to the medicine. Vincent is on his way to fix the power, but he runs into an infected Richard and doesn't even hesitate to repeatedly smash him in the head with his flashlight. It doesn't matter how hard he hits him, the creature won't go down, so Vincent runs for the oxygen tube and crawls back. He yells at Rebecca to open the panel while warning her that he didn't seal the other end of the tube. The others put on their helmets right before pulling Vincent out. Then, Kim grabs 2 bottles of antibiotics and chucks them at Richard, who isn't stopped at all. Vincent and Rebecca make a run for the airlock, hoping to get away. At that moment, Robert notices Charles's body is starting to reanimate, so he also runs and locks the door behind him, leaving Kim behind to die under the creature's attack. When he joins up with Vincent and Rebecca, he just says that Kim didn't make it. In the airlock, the creature they sprayed earlier is starting to wake up, so Robert just kicks it a whole bunch of times in anger. The trio finally gets the airlock open and escapes, but on the way out, their infected friend stabs Rebecca in the leg with a pair of scissors. Luckily, the team is quick enough to get to the rover, and Vincent injects Rebecca with the antibiotic, really hoping it'll help her body fight off the bacteria. The group takes off in the rover, but after a couple of moments, they realize they don't have enough power to get all the way to the landing site. They're going to have to walk there, which Rebecca just can't do because of her leg injury. Vincent thinks they should take Rebecca back to the base to treat her wound, but Robert thinks they should just leave her behind because she's already infected. Rebecca points out that Robert could be infected too, since Charles grabbed his neck, but he just changes the subject. Robert remembers that there's another rover over at the dig site, so that's where they head. When they get there, Robert goes on foot to the other rover and then calls Vincent on the radio, telling him to just leave Rebecca. Vincent refuses, so Robert just takes off by himself. Vincent gets out to stop him, but it's way too late. To make things even worse, he sees that the infected are following them and are getting closer. Vincent and Rebecca drive the rover straight through the sandstorm, hoping to lose them, but the vehicle just dies on them, and they're forced to hide out until the storm finally passes. In the morning, Vincent wakes up and finds a message from the space station, letting him know a rescue team is on its way. He tries to answer the message, but the station can't hear him. Then he realizes Rebecca has left the rover, so he starts to follow her footsteps. Eventually, he finds her, but Rebecca tells him to stay away because she feels like the infection is already taking over. Desperate to save her, Vincent runs to her, and so Rebecca takes off her helmet, suffocating to death in just a few minutes. Her body reanimates and attacks Vincent, who struggles to hold her back. Rebecca begs him to just end it, so Vincent chooses mercy and smashes her head with a rock. A few moments later, Vincent spots the Aurora getting closer, so he runs for the landing site. Unfortunately, there are also 3 creatures heading there too, so Vincent tries to warn the Aurora not to open the hatch, but they can't hear him because of the storm interference. As soon as the rescue team gets out, the creatures attack and kill them, and their screams of terror can be heard by Vincent over the radio. He keeps going and finds the creatures feeding on the rescue team, but at least they don't seem to notice his presence. There's also a body just rotting away in the worst possible state, so Vincent gets into the ship and, after locking the door, he finds Robert in the cockpit. Robert is still conscious, but Vincent can already see the signs of infection and tells him they can't risk bringing the bacteria back to Earth. Robert quickly attacks him, and a fight breaks out. During the fight, Robert stabs Vincent's helmet. Robert then tries to fly the ship, but Vincent grabs the knife and stabs him right back. As the ship starts to fly on its own and shakes terribly, the 2 men keep on fighting, and Vincent repeatedly headbutts Robert until he finally stops moving. Next, he takes off Robert's blood-stained helmet and opens up the hatch, throwing Robert's body out into space. For the few seconds that he's struggling to breathe, Vincent imagines Rebecca there, comforting him. Afterwards, he sends a message to the station, telling them everything that happened. He knows there's a good chance he's infected too, so he explains his plan to crash the ship on Mars as soon as he notices any symptoms at all. The Aurora just keeps on flying as he waits for a reply. Iwai. However, nothing is ever heard back, and Vincent just disappears into the vastness of space. And that's how Last Days on Mars, the 2013 sci-fi horror movie, ends. And I hope to see you in the next video.